All right, so Crystal Anderson, most of you know me, and my project is focusing on integrating community engagement, field surveys, and GIS to assess pollinator communities and future risk in coastal wetlands. All right. All right, so I'm going to talk about the study area first because all of my research is happening in the same area. It is located in McClellanville, South Carolina. To a lot of the local residents, that is also referred to as Germanville. It is on the South Santee River Delta in Charleston County, so just after you cross over the river into Charleston. This research is a collaboration with Hampton Plantation, which has a long-standing bond and interest within this community. And we are also working with Howard AME Methodist Church. This is a kind of a backbone to the community. They still have an active cemetery on Hampton Plantation. So there's actually a part of Hampton that is carved out because these are the slave descendants to this property. The first part of my research works with that community in McClellanville, most of which are, like I said, direct descendants of the slaves from Hampton Plantation. So gardening can be a path to health empowerment and food access. Gardening offers more than just aesthetic value. It promotes mental well-being, reduces stress. It can be a creative outlet. Both private and community gardens are key to improving access to fresh foods, which are especially important because about 13% of Americans currently struggle with food insecurity. And these numbers are even greater in these rural, low-income communities like the one that I'm working in. While gardens can be a part of the solution, we have to acknowledge that there are challenges when putting things like this in these rural communities. There's things such as cost and maintenance. You have things like that may limit the participation of these community members. Addressing these barriers are going to be essential for making gardening more equitable in these communities and improving that food access. So these community gardens, they also do more than just growing food. When you get in there, you are making connections for these community members. They help reduce that social isolation. And a lot of people, we all experienced that during COVID. So we know how detrimental that can be to our mental well-being. They create spaces that have food access while preserving cultural traditions, which is really important in these historical communities. At the same time, they're going to benefit the local public. They're going to create hands-on spaces. They serve as powerful platforms for environmental education. And that's kind of what brought me into this community, that educational aspect. They're also going to help bridge gaps in science and help with an understanding and fostering of a much deeper sense of environmental stewardship for the communities that are involved. So I have 4 main objectives with this research. The first one is about assessing food insecurity within that community, garden barrier access, community cohesion, pollinator knowledge, and culturally significant plants. The second part of my research is looking at launching that community garden, doing pollinator surveys to get materials for pollinators, making sure that we're creating food access and having that community engagement, getting them involved. The third part of my research is where we're going to evaluate, did this program work? We're going to use follow-up surveys to measure the gains in knowledge on pollinators. Did these people use the garden? Was it beneficial for them? Did they feel like this project created that social cohesion? And did we improve those pro-environmental behaviors? The fourth part is going to be determining if that program was successful, could it be implemented in other rural underserved communities around coastal South Carolina? It always starts with a literature review. So we needed to know what kind of surveys had already been done. Had this work been done in other rural communities? Not really. A lot of times you see this type of stuff done in cities, right? They're trying to work with these underserved communities in cities, but it's very rarely done with rural communities. So that was kind of interesting. But those surveys that we did look at gave us a place to launch where we knew what kind of questions to ask. Then we had to go into development of that survey. We used multiple choice, Likert scale, image-based identification, multi-select, as well as free response. We had to go through the Clemson Institutional Review Board to get approval for this. We then held a community launch event. And here we had this survey. I tell them I bribed them with food. I fed them like I did you guys today because it was a massive survey. So they had to spend a lot of time on it. We had games, we had rides, like we had the kids involved. We really wanted them to feel like we were doing this for them. We asked them things on the survey, such as their current experience with gardening. What were their perceptions of pollinators and gardening? What was their sense of self-efficacy? Did they feel like they could do this? What's their issues with food access, as well as 8 additional demographic questions. We actually had 40% of the community respond. And if anyone in here has ever done survey work, you know that even though the community was small, that's still a very high response rate on survey work. And then we established that garden with the help of community and Keegan and just like so many volunteers have come out and helped me with this. Like it was really a group project. We actually put in 20 garden beds. It took about 30 cubic tons of soil, as well as, again, lots of volunteers. There has been, excuse me, a little bit of preliminary results off of these surveys. In this first figure, you're seeing that while common pollinators such as bees and butterflies were recognized, mostly, many respondents failed to identify the lesser known pollinators such as hoverflies and beetles. Non-pollinators such as cats and pigs and dogs were also frequently misclassified. So that indicates that there could be an opportunity for gains in public knowledge. And I will always say this as a caveat because there's going to be somebody out there that's a little bit pedantic like me. Yes, anything could potentially be a pollinator, but in this, we're looking at it from more of the, what are the established pollinators, the insect type. Okay. In figure 2, we could see that a majority could recognize a good pollinator habitat. And so what we did was we gave them 2 images. One was an image of something that had lots of floral resource, and the other one was a manicured lawn with not a single flower in it. So when presented with those 2 things and given 5 questions about what type of habitat this was, a good portion could identify the good, but then we still had about 35% that was identifying the bad pollinator habitat as something that would be good for pollinators. And only about 22 to 25% could actually ID both correctly. We looked at the community interest in gardening because what's the point of having a gardening project if no one cares? We saw that about 52% of respondents were interested in doing this project. 22% were kind of like, no, I don't want to be involved. And then we had 26% that was on the fence. What we have found is that as these vegetables are starting to come in, the community is getting more excited. A lot of these maybes have transitioned to helping. And the no's, they might not be helping, but they're still enjoying the food. So we also have figure 4, which is looking at their reasoning for interest. And it kind of was what I anticipated, that they were looking for community cohesion. A lot of these communities over the last 30 or 40 years have kind of fallen apart, right? They've lost that sense of community. A lot of their children moved away and went to bigger cities. A lot of those children are now starting to move back. So they really want to bring the community back together. And of course, they were looking for fresh access to food. We talk about these food gardens. Oftentimes you'll hear that in reference to these rural communities where they have to travel 30, 40, 50 minutes just to have access to fresh foods at a grocery store. So that was interesting for them to have that, or they were interested in having that fresh access to food. And then some of them just wanted to learn how to garden, which again, I was kind of shocked because I grew up with a grandparent that gardened and I'm working with people that are sort of that same age. So I was kind of like, okay, they don't know how to garden, but that's okay. We're going to learn how to do it together because guess what? Neither do I. All right, so what's next with this part of my project? We are going to be installing, as a matter of fact, next week, a drip irrigation system with the help of Clemson Extension, because as I said, this is an elderly community. So getting out there and watering 20 beds every day is a huge feat for these people to try and come out. We want to make it as easy as possible. We're going to hold a pollinator workshop once we get some of this material developed. I'm hoping it will be in November of this year because we anticipate being able to hold one of those big community involved events every November. And it's already on schedule, I think, for November the 9th. We're going to do follow-up surveys to assess that effectiveness of this pollinator education and community response to the gardening. Multi-year pollinator survey is now currently running through South Carolina parks because we thought if we're already working with Hampton State Park, let's figure out what we can get from the general public and visitors to our state, because that's only going to help inform additional educational materials. And then the creation of those pollinator education materials for South Carolina residents as well as South Carolina state parks. All right, so going into chapter 2, while working with this community is a huge part of what I'm doing in my research, another major focus is understanding how coastal wetlands can support pollinators and how various climate scenarios may be impacting their diversity and abundance. So pollinators in coastal wetlands, they play a vital role, yet understood role, in supporting biodiversity, plant reproduction, and even ecosystem resilience. These habitats are often overlooked in pollinator research. I could find very little research on wetland pollinators. And despite the fact that we have increasing threats from things like sea level rise, saltwater intrusion, and habitat degradation, there's just not a lot out there. So understanding pollinator dynamics in wetlands is going to be essential for effective conservation of these species. Right now, we know that about 75% of flowering plants are pollinated from our pollinators, 35% of global crops. So think, if we are losing our pollinators, in which we are at an unprecedented level, what's that going to do to us, right? We are not going to be able to even support ourselves. They, as I said, are essential for that biodiversity, food webs, and ecosystem stability. If they are helping plants reproduce, that is creating roots that are stabilizing soils in these wetlands. Wetland pollinators are likely aid in some nutrient cycling and, again, definitely plant reproduction. Coastal wetlands support rare species like monarchs and butterflies, and I'll talk about I think it was Billy McCord with SEDNR actually found resident pollinators here in South Carolina over the last 10 to 15 years. So that's kind of what got me interested in this project. We do know that stressors that can harm pollinators and those plant interactions and ecotones increase pollinator diversity via floral and edge habitats. The objectives were to measure Lepidoptera, butterfly, and Apidae, which is bee diversity and abundance across 3 ecotones, to assess biodiversity patterns and community variation across these habitats, and to identify habitat factors that will shape that pollinator distribution. This research is kind of focusing on understanding how the butterflies and bee diversity is going to vary around brackish wetlands. By quantifying species diversity and comparing community composition, we can identify how biodiversity is partitioned across landscapes. We are particularly interested in the environmental factors, though, that are driving these patterns that we're going to see, and this can help inform habitat management strategies that support both pollinator health and broader ecosystem resilience. So this is the 3 ecotones that we have set up. You can see, there might be a clicker that works. Maybe not. But you can see over here, we've got the planted pine, which is sitting next to a broken tidal rice impoundment. So that one just has constant flow coming in and out. Down here, we've got the open prairie, which they are actually turning into like a maze out there. They want to turn it into this pollinator garden that allows people to come in and walk through the different pollinator species. And then over here, we have an intact rice impoundment right next to it. They've actually reconstructed the dike and reinstalled the rice trunk out there. So we're surveying these 3 areas. For the Lepidoptera, the butterflies, we're using 50 by 25 meter transects. We're doing it with nets, and we're doing it between 1,100 and 1,400 hours, about every 10 days. For the Apidae, we are using 3 colors of pan traps and vein traps, and we're setting them out for 24 hours. We are already finding that bees prefer blue. I don't think we found a bee in any of the other colors, although mosquitoes really like the color yellow. So we're going to look at the environmental variables. We're going to measure temperature, humidity, cloud, floral cover, wind speed, and it should have said barometric pressure at multiple points during each one of these surveys, and we're going to track those environmental changes. Drought data and recent rainfall totals will also be taken up And one of the things that you find is that a lot of people will only do these surveys during certain weather conditions, and the only one that's going to stop us from doing them is going to be active rain, because I think we're going to start seeing some differences in behavior based on climate variables and other things that are going on, and I would like to try and find that out. And again, this is going to be conducted year round, because with Billy McCord of SED&R finding that we have resident monarchs, I want to see what else is happening year round. The anticipated results with rising temperatures, I think that we're going to see pollinator activity that's going to be outside of that expected traditional survey period. I think that floral bloom timing is going to strongly influence species abundance and diversity. And again, as our temperatures and all these environmental variables are changing, bloom times are changing. I think that open prairies are likely to support the highest level of pollinator richness due to those greater floral resources, while planted pine stands are going to have the least amount. I do anticipate that we're going to find that these rice impoundments are going to be refuges for specialist species. And then chapter 3, it's coming soon. So I've got to get through the second part of the study, at least have some data and kind of know what species to target, because my hope is that I can look at the plant pollinator interactions and then use that to do some GIS work to look at assessed range shifts for these species. So if we've got saltwater coming in and that plant species cannot tolerate those saltwater increases, what's that going to do to those pollinators that depend on that plant? My hope is that with this research, I can help refine some of the species distribution models by incorporating mutualistic relationships, not just abiotic factors. I would like to find some gains in understanding of the codependence between plants and pollinators so that we can better predict cascading effects of these different climate variables. I want to establish frameworks that detect mismatches in phenology and range over time. I want to be able to reveal what pollinators are most vulnerable due to these climate change scenarios or the loss of associated plant species, help prioritize conservation zones where both plants and pollinators can persist together, and then use that, because a lot of times as we see species shifts happening, we have to practice adaptive management. So I would like to be able to look at what plants can survive where to ensure that these species still have somewhere to go. And with that, got a lot of people to thank. Obviously, the James C. Kennedy Center for allowing me to do this kind of offside wetland project, but I do think it's very valuable considering, it's the reason we have food. Native Plants to the People for helping me with plant selection, bringing the plants to me and helping me plant them in the appropriate places. Clemson Cooperative Extension, I'm extra grateful for the Clemson Creative Choir this summer, because they gave me 2 amazing interns that have really helped me get this project off the ground. South Carolina Native Plant Society for the work that they've done. Natural Resources is our funder. So USDA. So just been a lot of people. Hampton Plantation, of course, and Clemson Extension. And of course, I have to thank my committee, Jim Anderson, Jess Hartshorn, Jeff Halo, David White, and then I want to thank Brad Fowler. He's going to be the one that's coming out to help us with this drip system and has given me a lot of knowledge on how to garden, because I'm telling you, I don't know how to do it. And I have to give special thanks to a few more people. You can see all the work they have put in helping me here. I've got Keegan, Ty, Drew, Miriam has come out and helped. Jason Sellers with the Hampton Plantation, Christopher has come out there. Ewan, Cody, and Hannah, Ashley from Hampton Plantation are out there with me almost every time I go. Charlene with Native Plants for the People. My friend Philip, the Hampton community, and of course my husband Will. I've put him to work a lot. And then if you need to see references, here's a list. Please message me. Here's some of the pictures of me trying to avoid mosquitoes and all the other hazards that come with working out here in this wetland and this coastal of South Carolina. If you have questions, and that is also a link to the survey. If you would be interested in sharing the survey with people, the one that's going out through SE Parks, please let me know. I will email it out to the board. And with that, questions? No. That's here. Oh, yay. Okay. Are y'all in your survey? We have not yet. But Drew, what was the name of the species we think you have found?
Rose mallow.
So rose mallow, and when you go to when you go to, like looking up where these things are supposed to be found, it says that it can potentially possibly be here, but there's only been one or two reported sightings ever. And we are finding a lot, like almost all of the bees that are going into our blue traps look like this. So I need to find an entomologist that is really good with ID, because everything we've looked at so far is telling us that we have a huge population of those out here, but that's the only thing we found. And so it's not rare or at risk. I did have Charlene Johnson from Native Plants to the People. She was out there with me doing some surveys, kind of get an idea of how to roll this project out with certain plants. And I cannot remember which one she saw last year, but she did see one, got very, very excited about it. So I do know that there is some at-risk species out there based on her sightings. So anyone else? Yeah.
I noticed that just like with my impoundments, your ecotones areas at the plantation down there are different sizes.
Yes.
So you had to standardize, it looks like your surveys for like butterflies at least, using like the same area for each.
Yes. Yeah, and thankfully the rice impoundment, the I call it the dike that runs across right there is just short of my limit. So it worked out. So we just basically walk it all day and try to catch anything that we can see within sight. And we've had a couple of pictures. I don't think I have them up there. Well, there was one of him almost all the way out at the river trying to chase a butterfly. So yeah, we're going after him. Anyone else? Okay, thank you.